Welcome to the second day of Cassandra. I am glad to be here and to moderate such a great panel as we move from hearing all the problems to working with people who are really trying to solve the problems. So today is much more about, we know we have these problems. We know that they are broad, meaning that they affect the widest group of people. We know that one piece fits into the next piece, so it's a very hard problem to solve because you can't isolate the clean drinking water from farming, from livelihood, from the planet. And so we have a wonderful group of people today who have been viewing the water problem, as it said in the early part, from the mountains to the sea. So without any further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce the panel, and then we'll show a couple of videos, and then they will take it up individually right in the order that we gave them. So the first of our panel to speak will be DURK KROL, who is the Executive Director of Water Europe. Following is Nina RAASAKKA, who is the head of our World Water Quality Alliance. And then there's TANJA MISKOVA, who represents the Foreign Ministry of Slovenia and has a real interest and very much of involvement around water and the issues of water and peace and water and livelihood and water in international relations. And then most of you know Phoebe Kubori, who is our economist, but also heads a list of associations and all involved with the economic impact and the social impact of water in the environment. So without any further ado, I think we'll cut into the videos.
We all know that water is life. It is that simple. Water is essential for human health, well-being, and livelihoods. It's necessary for ecosystem functioning and services and the survival of all living species on this planet. But we also know the terrible impacts from waste and pollution that are impacting water quality. This is why, through the World Water Quality Alliance, we are trying to better understand and take action to defend water quality. The Alliance is a voluntary and flexible global multi-stakeholders network that advocates the central role of freshwater quality in achieving prosperity and sustainability. It was convened some years ago in response to the UN Environment Assembly resolution called Addressing Water Pollution to Protect and Restore Water-Related Ecosystems, which was adopted at the third session of UNEA by all United Nations member states. This resolution highlights the need for action to preserve water quality around the world, and as you can hear from its title, recognizes that water is essential for ecosystem functioning and services. The resolution initially requested UNEP to develop a global water quality assessment, and thus the Alliance was set up, recognizing that substantial cooperation and partnership in an area as complex as water quality was needed to deliver such an assessment. And simply keeping this type of activity restricted, as it were, to a technical audience, would not help us to fully move from data to action. So today the Alliance has 16 work streams under it, and it works through a whole of society approach, engaging with local communities, students, through to governments and water quality experts, and also other multilateral organizations. Work streams range from technical work streams with a focus on modeling and scenario analysis of water pollution into the future, to groundwater, monitoring plastics in freshwater, piloting citizen science, to social engagement and youth involvement, which are themes that indeed cut across the spectrum of work that the Alliance does. And this is what makes it so exciting for us, especially working in an environment traditionally focused on data collection, generation, and monitoring. There's an urgent need to act, given what we know already about water quality and its degradation worldwide, and how climate change and other drivers of environmental degradation will continue to negatively impact ecosystems and societies around the world. We are trying to move from data to action through the mobilization of all sectors of society to understand, generate, and interpret data and bring to the forefront directly the issues they are dealing with, so as to participate in the co-creation of solutions to water quality problems through a bottom-up approach that identifies some of the local demands and needs in order to really make this a truly sustainable mobilization of action.
I'm excited to be invited once again to Cassandra Conference to discuss scientific, technological, and socio-political answers to the effect of climate change for the region of Africa and the Mediterranean, definitely hotspot regions for climate change. In this panel, I will try to discuss the work of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network Global Climate Hub that focuses on holistic, interdisciplinary, and intradisciplinary work for co-designing with stakeholders adaptation and mitigation pathways, implementable adaptation and mitigation pathways for the transition to climate resilience and climate neutrality. We work in 9 different units. The first one dealing with data, platforms, and applications. The second on climatology and atmospheric physics. The third one on climate and energy modeling. The fourth one on land use and marine use modeling. The fifth one on climate and health. The sixth one on acceleration of innovation, technological, social, and financial innovation to facilitate climate solutions reaching the market as soon as possible. The next unit works on the socioeconomic narrative of the transition and focuses on just transition and leaving no one behind. And the last 2 units refer to capacity building for engaging the stakeholders into co-designing the transition pathways. So the 8th unit is about innovative participatory approaches for co-designing with all the relevant stakeholders of the transition pathways, detailed transition pathways that are implementable. And finally, the 9th unit is about education, upskilling, and reskilling in order to be able to truly engage in the transition, to have the capacity, the knowledge, the skills to truly engage in the transition. Thank you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Terrific. That really sets the stage for us because we're moving from yesterday's description of the problems to really action that has an impact, action that makes a difference and moves us ahead in this. And so I'm going to ask DURK to lead us off, who is, as I mentioned before, the Executive Director of Water Europe. Thank you, DURK.
Thank you very much, Richard. And if you allow me, as I've been a very bad boy and I didn't produce a video, I will briefly explain to people actually what Water Europe is. So Water Europe is a purpose-driven multi-stakeholder association, really representing the full value chain of what I would call the innovative water sector. We were originally set up by the European Commission as a European technology platform and have evolved since there to being, as I already mentioned, really an association covering the whole value chain of water with currently 270 members, with the ultimate ambition also to achieve what we call a water smart society. So for us, a water smart society is really a society in which the value of water is recognized and realized to achieve water security, water sustainability, and water resilience. It's a society in which all available water sources are managed in such a way that water scarcity and pollution are avoided. water and resource loops are largely closed to foster a circular economy and optimal resource efficiency. The water system is resilient against the impacts of climate and demographic change. And very importantly, I think also in the context of this discussion today, all relevant stakeholders are engaged in guaranteeing sustainable water governance. Now, in order to do that, we develop a whole range of activities which can be summarized under collaborate, innovate, and advocate. And I think if you look in our activities and how we're trying to change things, I think the main drivers for change in our society with regard to water come either from legislation, resources, financial resources, human resources, or the imminent water crisis. Yeah. Now, if we look at legislation, I think we can see that the problem of water is also always that water is a very fragmented sector. There are 10,000 of actors out there doing something with water, being it utilities, being it local public administrations dealing with water, being it SMEs, being it a whole variety of actors. And at the same time, on a political level, water is always a very transversal topic. Yeah, usually you see water is never a standalone topic. Water is usually part of some other kind of policy, being it environmental policy, industrial policy, agricultural policy, economic policy, industrial policy, gender equality policy, research policy, etc. Yeah, which also means that whether you look at it from a European level, national level, or local level, water is never a standalone topic. It always runs the risk of being neglected. Yeah? So for me, the first thing we need to do now is kind of turn the organizational matrix of our governance institutions 90 degrees and make water a standalone topic. We hope to commence with that with the after European elections at the European level, where hopefully we will have a vice president of the European Commission responsible for really the 360 degrees water management. So tying all the knots together from the different uses of water. And hopefully that will have a trickle down effect to our national governments and local and regional governments. I think that's really an important thing to really drive change. Of course, another important thing is making the resources available. We can see that at least at European level, over the last year, a lot of investments, resources have been made available for what are considered politically, I would say, crucial topics, like, for example, the hydrogen economy. I would say strengthen the European strategic autonomy by making sure we have chips production back in Europe, but also making sure that we have enough water for the data centers. But usually, I mean, when people speak at top political level about the hydrogen economy, few realize that actually you need 9 liters of water to make 1 liter of hydrogen. I think also few people realize that if you want to, I would say, shore up chips production from Taiwan or whatever back to Europe, few people realize that actually for a 30 centimeter wafer, integrated wafer circuit, you need 3,800 liters of water. Yeah, and also few people actually do realize that to set up the data centers that we need for the green and digital transition, we need huge amount of water to cool the data center. So I think that's an important thing to realize. So it's really important that at strategic level, being at European level, being at national level, we also make the funds available that allow us to have, I would say, a good management of water, enough water available to support these strategic developments. A last point, I think, which is really driving change, and I think unfortunately we've had to wait for it, and now it's there. I think it's the imminent water crisis. To give you an example, there just before the summer holidays, I was having a discussion with the vice president for heavy industry in one of the multinationals we work in and work with, and he actually told they're providing solutions for water efficiency in industry, and he told me that um, we've been warning politicians at European and national level so long now about the imminent water crisis. They never really took the action, and now we see that we have plants and individual companies, industrial companies competing for our solutions because they needed that the water for water efficient to increase their water efficiency in their companies, and simply we cannot deliver because for a long time the European Commission or other politicians did not really act upon the imminent water crisis, which also means that the signals have not been sent, and in the whole educational system, the right focus has not been put. So actually he told me we can't even get the human resources to work on these solutions simply because the educational system is not delivering them right now. So I think that as a first, I would say, scene setter for me. Now at Water Europe, of course we're also trying to work at concrete solutions, working around very concrete challenges. For that we have come up with the concept of water-oriented living labs. There we did which have also become a cornerstone of the Water for All partnership under Horizon Europe. For those who are less familiar with the European funding system, Horizon Europe is the big funding instrument of the European institutions for research and innovation. So for us, water-oriented living labs are really real life geographical time-limited collaboration spaces where we really bring together the quadruple helix, so government, industry, researchers, and civil society, to really work on a concrete challenge and to find a systematic solution for that. So also a different way of addressing these challenges in the past, which even sometimes, and we hope we're going to get there, allow temporary legal derogations, to see to work in different ways, and to see if certain ways of working that currently perhaps meet legal challenges could actually solve the issues we're working with. So that is the first opener from my side. Richard, you're muted. I'm quite sure you're saying very interesting things. But...
Only when I'm muted do I say very interesting things. But that was really terrific, Dirk, and you opened this up for a lot of very interesting discussion. But let me jump to Nina now to talk a little bit more about the World Water Quality Alliance.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Richard. So I had briefly introduced the World Water Quality Alliance in my video, but yeah, as I was actually just looking up the definition of an alliance, and again, the definition that Google tells me is a union or association for mutual benefit, especially between countries or organizations, or a relationship based on similarity of interests, nature, or qualities. So again, I think in the spirit of these definitions, the World Water Quality Alliance is really a network of organizations, whether they be small local communities that are brought together by what we call the social engagement platform, or whether they're multilateral, either UN organizations or other regional networks are doing research either on the national, regional, or global level. And really the alliance was convened, as I said, as a response to this United Nations Environment Assembly resolution to act on water pollution to improve the health of both human societies, but also ecosystems. And how we act is again realizing that we can do another assessment. Of course, there is a strong demand for such an assessment, and water quality has been recognized as a topic where we need more data on. Of course, we there is data that is maybe not captured in, for instance, the monitoring of the SDG indicator 6.3.2, which looks at ambient water quality around the world. And by the way, which we're doing the third data drive on that this year. So there'll be a new report coming out, I believe, next year that captures kind of the state of that on a global level. It's about half the world's countries that overall report on that indicator. So you can already see that there are gaps in terms of even global level reporting against the Sustainable Development Goals on water quality. But again, it's not just enough to get the data and to have a map saying this country has good water quality, or this, for example, this river basin has such water quality. It's what are you going to do with that data? And I think that's how we come at it. And that's the original reason why the Alliance was convened, to help provide a platform for different stakeholders who all have a say. I mean, we're all affected by poor water quality, to come to the table and to say either, look, this is the specific water quality issues that are impacting me and my community. And what we want to do is kind of connect both vertically, so going from the local level and trying to find these bottom-up solutions and identify these problems occurring at a local level, connect these to some of the global level initiatives for monitoring data or either generating data, for instance, through a citizen science, citizen engagement approach, to then also looking at it vertically. So connecting these wide variety of stakeholders that range from the very technical researchers undertaking modeling on water quality, the pollutants kind of impacting water quality, whether it's emerging. I take a bit of an issue with that word, because emerging, something like plastics, we know this is not a surprise to anyone. So we call them emerging pollutants, but maybe it's more the non-traditional parameters of water quality. But so we try to convene and connect, again, communities who are impacted by water quality issues to also those researching them and providing the data and helping them monitor and understand this problem, and also looking at how to produce an assessment that is accessible to not just a technical audience, but that really raises the flag, in a sense, of the water quality crisis that we're faced with. And of course, that is only being made worse by driving pressures such as climate change, environmental degradation, and such, but also use it as a means to co-create and to identify solutions. And again, maybe turning that narrative a bit on its head and saying water is not always a problem. You can actually use it as a means to develop solutions as well by managing it well. So it can be an entry point to, for example, transboundary cooperation, and to bringing these different groups of people together to really focus on what can be that solution based on the data and the information at hand, or how to get additional data on that. Thanks. I think, Richard, you're on mute again. So
I was trying to be good by being on mute, but I see I failed again. But great discussion about how you can talk about shortage of water, but also then talk about it as a solution. And Phoebe may pick some of that up in her discussion. So we'll move ahead to Tanja, who has also been very much involved in border issues with water and peace, and its involvement with water or because of water. Tanja?
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, water and peace is a very important priority for us. And for those of you who may be wondering why Slovenia is so engaged on water and peace, I mean, water is a very, I would say, emotional issue for us. I can't explain why, but we have the right to water inscribed into our constitution. But the Water and Peace Nexus comes from our own historic experience in the Western Balkans, where, if you remember, in the mid-90s, there was a bloody conflict ranging for 4 years or more. And actually, after the peace agreement was concluded in Dayton, the first regional agreement among the former warring parties was actually on water, on the Sava River. So we saw how water cooperation can help build trust and pave way for ways of other forms of cooperation, how it can help build a peace. So from this experience, we became, great proponents of the Water and Peace Nexus and of transboundary water cooperation. So we're very active on both topics. Just to briefly mention water and peace, an issue which is very important for us and I think is very pertinent at the moment if we look at what's going on in Gaza, is the protection of water resources and water infrastructure in armed conflict. Because there is nothing more, debilitating to any society than not having access to water, especially during conflict. But on the transboundary, I want to focus a bit more on that. Of course, in Europe, we're champions of transboundary water cooperation. But just briefly to relate it to something that Dirk mentioned, that we need a vice president of the European Commission on water. I think he needs, as basis of his work, I think he needs an EU strategy on water. We have, sorts of strategies, a plethora of strategies, EU strategies on circular economy, on hydrogen. We have a strategy on hydrogen, but we don't have a strategy on water. I think there's a dissonance here. So, and also another thing Dirk was referring to, water for conductors and for data systems, is to basically talking about water in mitigation. When we talk water and climate, which is another important priority for us, we always talk about, water and adaptation. What's the role of water in adaptation? But we hardly ever discuss the role of water and water systems in mitigation. And we've been trying now to raise this issue also within the COP negotiations. We managed last year with, getting attention to water and adaptation. Hopefully this year we'll, at Dubai COP, will make the breakthrough in water mitigation. But to come back to the transboundary, 60% of all fresh water globally, crosses national borders. So we can't really solve water issues without transboundary water cooperation. It goes without saying, and yet, the trends are not really that positive, at best stagnating. So we're trying to make the case for transboundary water cooperation, also based on our good experience. Usually upstream countries are the ones that are more reluctant to engage. They don't see benefits. Where we're an upstream country, most of our rivers, they have their sources in the country. So, and yet we see the benefits of effective and equitable and inclusive transboundary water cooperation. And I mentioned the Sava River Basin. It was the first agreement after the war, and the agreement was signed in 2001, which is not that that long ago. But today, this River Basin Commission is globally considered as one of the best functioning ones. And just to mention on the stakeholder involvement, it has a very lively and vibrant youth parliament, which I think is hugely important. And also we, to kind of help reverse the trends, or I would say accelerate transboundary water cooperation, we also joined forces with like-minded countries and organizations and established a transboundary water cooperation coalition. We started a year ago, and with our initial goal to motivate countries and organizations and private sector to commit voluntary commitments for the Water Action Agenda for the UN Water Conference, which took place in March. Only the second water conference in the history of the UN, can you imagine? The first one was in 1977, when I was 7 years old. Can you imagine what a gap in the international attention to water issues? Dirk was saying, that we don't see the water issues, and this is, I think, the most obvious sign for how long the water was invisible in the UN. So hopefully now we will have these regular conferences which are very important to put the water on the agenda. And I can tell you I was involved in the preparatory process for this conference for the last 3 years, and getting transboundary water cooperation on the agenda as one of the topics to be discussed at the conference was a huge uphill struggle, huge uphill struggle. Even a year before the conference, it was not a given that this is going to be a topic. So we have a lot of work to do, but there's great instruments that are there to help us do that. There's the UN, two UN water conventions, and one of them, the 1992 Helsinki Water Convention, has fantastic tools that can help us. You know, it has a methodology for making agreements, and for example, it has a methodology for nexus assessment, transboundary WEFE nexus assessment. And then compile the good cases so that countries can have a look and say, okay, this is interesting. And they're doing very, very impressive things. For example, in the Western Balkan regions, in the Skadar Lake, you know, 5 countries that are surrounding that are sharing the lake. They did first a transboundary diagnostic analysis. And based on that, you know, during a stakeholder involvement and intergovernmental dialogue, it was a long process, but they came up with Nexus roadmaps. So, and throughout the process, they did capacity development workshop, because, you know, when you're engaging stakeholders, you need also to build capacity in order for them to be able to participate. So the project is now developing, and what they're trying to do, for example, among other things, is they remove the invasive lake species from the lake to produce biofuel. And with this, they significantly reduced logging in the area, in addition to cleaning the lake. So it's basically a very much low-cost solution that can have tremendous positive benefits. So there are many other examples, but let me stop here for the moment. Thank you.
No, Tanja, thank you. It's those types of examples, I think, that lead people to want and more willing to engage. We used to call them win-win solutions, but we know that data alone doesn't solve the problem. And so I'm going to turn it over to Phoebe now, who has been working on this, as I would say, in more places than I can keep up with. So I'll just let you take it over from here, Phoebe.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Please give me a note when I have to stop so that I don't take too much time. I want to state that the way to approach our contemporary problems, and there are many crises at the moment, it's really to go about in a holistic, interdisciplinary and intradisciplinary approach. Water is central to civilization, is central to history, is central to development, and it is, of course, central to the performance of countries with regards to implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. I take it back to the Sustainable Development Goals because at the moment it's the only global agenda, together with the Charter of Human Rights. 163 countries have signed the Sustainable Development Goals. It is, one can say that the European Green Deal, it's a good transposition of the Sustainable Development Goals into a policy framework. So it is very relevant for Europe. And we also know that the European Green Deal is gaining momentum as a policy example beyond Europe, in the Balkans, in Africa, and so on. So how are we doing with regards to the SDGs that are relevant for water? And let me say here that no SDG is fully implemented, no Sustainable Development Goal is fully implemented without the other sustainable goals being fully implemented. So it's a very, very holistic and integrated framework. Obviously, there are some SDGs that have a very big load of water-related management. Is of course SDG 2 that is relevant for food security. It's SDG 6, which is explicitly about water and sanitation. It's SDG 7, which focuses on clean and affordable energy, and water is very relevant for this. And of course is SDG 15, land use. Here is where agriculture plays a very important role. So it is, as the bigger consumer of water across the world, is very relevant. And of course, SDG 13 is important because it's climate action. And we know that we are facing extreme weather events relevant to water, flooding, droughts, even heat waves that have a big footprint on water management and water availability. Unfortunately, the SDGs that have a heavy component on water management are not performing well. These are among the less well-performing SDGs. So there is definitely, and you can find the performance of each and every country across the world with regards to all the SDGs and with regards to all the 169 targets in them in the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network Sustainable Development Report. So water is underperforming. The management of water is not good enough, not in terms of quality, not in terms of quantity, not in terms of integrating into mitigation and adaptation processes with regards to facing the climate crisis. We are also underperforming with regards to water management when it comes to controlling the ecosystem collapse crisis. So we need to find a way forward that is reasonable. And for me, the way forward that is reasonable, it's an integrated approach that allows land use management to be well integrated with so the management of agriculture and water use in agriculture to be well integrated with climate targets and also food security targets. So we need to develop pathways, optimal mixtures of policies, technologies, and financial instruments, as well as social and governance innovations that will allow us to meet our climate targets, to meet our global biodiversity targets, and at the same time achieve food security, and at the same time achieve optimal, sustainable management of urban water as well. Urban water, water provision and sanitation in urban areas is also very important because half of humanity, 3.5 billion people, live in cities, and 5 billion people are projected to live in cities in 2030. 2050, 70% of the world population is predicted to live in urban settlements. So this rapid urbanization is exerting pressures on freshwater supply, seaways, the living environment, and public health. And water has a crucial role to play. So I agree that water does not been treated explicitly in water policies. The UN has not given water explicitly a very high profile role, and it's the same with EU policies. But I would say that water is the underlying shaping force of many policies, both under the European Green Deal and, of course, the SDGs and, of course, global conventions, because water is one of the most crucial ecosystems for supporting the agriculture, for supporting living in urban cities, for supporting growth, for creating jobs, for creating equality. And water is also crucially important, as it has been also said, with regards to transboundary collaboration. So it's not just about managing transboundary resources, but it's also enabling discussions between countries where we see conflicts is so easy to arise. So I'm just gonna refer to solutions. For example, in the UN as the Climate Hub, as I said before, we have 9 different units which try to integrate in a holistic manner water management in all other management structures that we need in order to provide solutions for countries to face the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the crisis that is related to low economic growth and inflationary pressures, and fiscal deficits. So we need to see our energy and transport system, solution pathways, sustainability pathways in being integrated with our land use system and marine use system. And in all of this, water plays a crucial role. And when we are devising these sustainability pathways, again, these are the optimal mixture for each nation of the policies, technologies, governance, and fiscal instruments, innovations that can allow the country to shift from unsustainable to sustainable practices. And once we have an integrated approach to regulate all systems, the energy system, the transport system, the land use system, the marine use system, this is when we will be able to have a sustainable management of water systems. And this integration has to go beyond nation and be at the regional level, for example, European level. And this is exactly what we do in this global climate hub. It's about the integration of the solution pathways and the socioeconomic narrative to support the solution pathways. Who pays for this transition? And how do we protect the vulnerable from this transition? So my biggest worry is not that water is not explicitly coming up in each and every policy. My biggest worry is whether the nations have the capacity to devise these pathways, these fully science-centric, fully holistic, integrated and data-hungry pathways. And that's why I believe scientists have a crucial role to play in going out to the governments and really providing the capacity to devise these pathways, and not just to the governments, but in an interdisciplinary approach. The governments, the policy makers, the financial institutions, the businesses, civil society, the NGOs need to talk to science and technology developers in order to devise pathways that all these stakeholders are ready to implement, all these stakeholders co-design, and they are owners of, and because they are owners of, they want to implement. And this is the beauty of the living labs. The science basis is presented to all other stakeholders, and then everybody contributes to the final design of the pathways. And in this way, we get implementation because we have policies. The money is there, the technology is there. What we are missing is implementation, and implementation comes through interdisciplinary approaches that are based on science. I'll leave it there and then I can come back.
Thank you. I mean, this idea of the living lab and the implementation being the key is what we're all about, as you said. But I know Dirk has a question, so I'll let him jump in first.
Well, firstly, I wanted to respond to Tanja, because I think Tanja said something very important about the fact that we need a water strategy. I think that is also true, and I'm very glad that also, and I'd like to share that with the wider community, that one of the European institutions that is a bit less familiar, the European Economic and Social Committee, which has a strongly advising role towards the three very well-known institutions, namely the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the European Council. They have recently launched a call for what they call a European Blue Deal. In their European Blue Deal, they've made 17 recommendations, important recommendations, to these key European, three other key European institutions, to which they have to respond. And I think this is a very strong agenda-setting role of the European Economic and Social Committee, which brings together basically employers, employees, and civil society. So I really hope and looking forward to the impact of the European Blue Deal. Although I've also already heard from certain politicians that in this European Blue Deal, of course, which is a wordplay linking it to the European Green Deal, the emphasis has to be a little bit more on the deal and less on the color. So meaning that I would say we have to match ambitions with resources, yeah, and not only legal obligations, but also I would say incentives. That is I would say building on Tanja's contribution. I also have a concrete question to Phoebe, which deals with, I think, with another important instrument, which I think really can be helpful. And I think Phoebe, as an economist, can really give us an answer there. To what degree, Phoebe, do you think the European taxonomy can really play a role in driving, I would say, the solutions for the water challenges?
The European taxonomy is crucial, and I think this is one of the most powerful policies within the European Green Deal, because it does two main things. It regulates with a very explicit way which investments can be considered sustainable. So you have a very explicit way of going to a bank and asking for cheaper loan, low interest loans, longer maturity loans for investments that have to do with climate mitigation, adaptation, circular economy, sustainable use of marine resources and water resources. So the banking sector, the financial sector, the multilateral banks explicitly recognize water management and the management of water quality and water quantity, and the adaptation of and how we adapt to extreme weather events from climate change, and how this relates to water management as well, and how we mitigate from from climate change, which also relates to water management. Circular economy also relates to water management. So all the taxonomy aspects are related to water management. So this is very important for streamlining capital to investments that can support the sustainability transition of Europe. In addition, the EU taxonomy incorporates the Corporate Sustainability Directive. This Sustainability Directive makes an explicit legal obligation for all large companies and all companies listed in regulated markets to submit a sustainability report. And this will be in effect in 2024. The information that the company needs to incorporate in the sustainability report is very clear and detailed, and needs to be assessed and monitored, and also needs to be digitally tagged. This means not just the financial sector, but also the corporate sector. The companies need to be regulated, need to be monitored and assessed against the so-called ESGs, environmental, social, and governance criteria. This is about the footprint of a company with regards to the environment. And of course, water use is one big aspect of these reports with regards to society, creating jobs and social cohesion, which again, water is crucial. And with regards to governance, how well do you govern your company? And I would say, and this is part of our work, my team's work under the Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation in IFORIA, I would say this ESG transition of the companies, which is with the EU taxonomy, should be also integrated with profitability, because profitability is an important element in all businesses. Companies are there to make profit, but the crucial thing, the key point is that this regulation will guide and incentivize companies to sustain and increase their profitability in a way that is ESG compatible. And there is a wealth of opportunities nowadays for doing that, because technology is becoming cost effective. And at the same time, not only you can lower your costs and become greener, become more sustainable, have a lower negative footprint on the environment, but at the same time, you can increase your market share, because there is consumer behavior that is changing towards sustainability preferences, towards ESG preferences. So there is a wealth of opportunities in this transition. And finally, let me say that this regulation, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, will become obligatory for all companies, SMEs including 2027. So this is a major revolution in the business world. And if implemented correctly, and it's not just about ticking boxes, we did that and we did that, and nothing actually is monitored and assessed. If it's implemented correctly, it will bring a evolution. And only the most innovative and fast, flexibly changing companies will be able to survive. So again, a bell to ring to say that the SMEs need help in that, because they won't have the space in terms of financial resources to make the investments and build their capacity in order to be able to respond to this. So here there is space for policy intervention and subsidization and help and protecting the vulnerable within the business world.
So I think that's a terrific point, which is using regulation in essence to change financial incentives, social balance, equity, et cetera. But we have about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to let each panelist spend 1 minute telling us who or what organization they would like to see a change in, so that we can move ahead quicker in this, or whatever you want to say in your last minute. So I'll start with Nina. You've been very quiet.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks, colleagues. There's been some really interesting interventions, so I've been listening keenly. Let me try and keep this to 1 minute. I think definitely the organizations that have a key stake in, again, taking up action is, I'm thinking the European Union is great because we have that supranational level of regulation that then drives financial incentives, etc. I'm thinking, again, in a global role about the rest of the world, and I think these regional organizations can help to drive things like availability of data, sharing data, and planning on a regional level, sharing, for example, solutions that work in their context. So that, I think, together with the private sector, is an area that I find crucial, again, as part of the identification of these solutions. And I think also just a few very brief perspectives. I mean, land use, I think, is a key area that touches on water, biodiversity, pollution, climate change. So it's fundamental that we get the stakeholders and all the industries related with land use in particular to be part of this. And finally, to mention, I think I always grapple with whether there's one strategy for water. As Tanja mentioned, the EU is coming out, as I understand, with an EU-wide strategy for water. The UN as well, after kind of waiting for so long, is working now on a UN system-wide strategy for water and sanitation. You'll hear more about that next year, but that, again, is an important effort to just coordinate and harmonize on all these actions. Thanks.
Thank you. Tanja?
Yeah, I was going to mention the UN strategy, but since Nina did, I'll focus on my government, on what I would like to see. And there are many governments that need to improve on what we heard, on the importance of integrated management of water resources and cross-sectoral cooperation and the nexus approach. I mean, this is, of course, a very complex endeavor, wrought with many different challenges, but it's something that needs to be done. And very important part of it that would make things much easier if the governments would work in a more inclusive way. We actually had that process in the 90s and kind of then anticipated where the experts, the scientists were sitting at the table. Different multi-stakeholders were sitting at the table when laws were being drafted, when policies were being construed, and then consulted throughout the process. And then the implementation, of course, worked to the optimal level. And we have great systems in place for water resources protection and nature protection, etc. But along the line, this process kind of, crumbled, and the experts are not sitting at the table anymore. And the consequences were there this summer when we had historic floods that engulfed, 2/3 of the country. And as a result of bad planning and wrong land use. So the effective communication, inclusive communication, citizens engagement is crucial if we want to, tackle the water crisis, I would say. Thanks.
Great. Phoebe?
Yes, I would like to just make the point that water it's local, national, regional, global, and unless we see it on all the different scales, we are not going to solve the problem. And the developed world has a responsibility towards the developing world, and that is why it is important that in the forthcoming COP, the loss and damage fund will need to be finalized, because we need to create the fiscal space and the capacity in the global south in order to be able to keep up with the developed world with regards to the sustainability transition. At the moment, we are doing nothing about this, literally very little, and we should be aware of the fact that no global problem will be solved without the Global South on board. Plus the responsibility of the effects on water resources from climate change, from the big polluters, and that render some countries within the Global South hotspots of climate change effects without really contributing to the creation of this crisis.
Well said. Thank you, Phoebe. Dirk, you started us off. Round us out.
Yes, okay. I will be very quick because we're over time already. I have 3 elements to mention. I think governance is very important, but I already quite, I think, addressed it in my initial statements. The point I would like to add there is the importance of these international fora like the UN Water Conference, but also the COP28, where we as Water Europe, we will also actively be participating together with CV and many other stakeholders. We will support there the water and climate pavilion, because they provide a feedback mechanisms to the European Commission and to national governments. So I think that's very important. Another one, which Tanja already briefly mentioned, but I would like to expand a little bit on that, is citizens engagement. I think that is really, really, really very important. And I think over the last 10, 15 years, I would say in many of our countries, we've seen a bit of a populist wave where politicians, I would say, eagerly respond to. And then, as Tanja says, they ignore, I would say, the real signals for, I would say, science-based, evidence-based governance and policies, which leads to certain of the disasters that we've been able to see. So I think scientists' involvement, citizen science is very important. And the last thing I want to mention, which I would think is often the elephant in the room, is the agricultural sector, because they are still the largest water user in many of our countries. Now, of course, the agricultural sector is also a very fragmented sector, so it's not that easy to address. Sometimes it's also a very conservative and productive sector. And I think we need to do something about water use by the agriculture sector in a way that also takes very serious care of their concerns. And because, I mean, they have very valid concerns, but we need to find a constructive solution for that both serves, I would say, the interests of water, sustainable water use, and makes it possible for them to economically survive. That's it.
Yeah, again, thank you. This has been an awesome group. And it's clear that water affects everybody, from the ecosystem to the living system, whether you're talking about a farmer or a business or a chip maker or a government or a society. And if we don't involve people and solve their problems, they will never help, quote, solve ours. If ours is sustainability, we have learned now that we must involve the people most affected to have effective solutions. And this group has been terrific, including data, including sort of cities, global. And so I just want to thank everything that you did to prepare for this and to be here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think we're over time, and so I will say goodbye, but hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye.